your attention for a little bit, please. Around about half an hour to 45 minutes. So, welcome to Mobile Dorset. Thank you all for coming on this kind of brilliantly sunny day. Yeah, good dedication. So, thanks to our sponsors of three-sided cube base, Bournemouth University, created from rugged data. That's what has fed you today, and what kind of enables us to be in this space as well, which is really good. So today, I'm going to be talking about React Native and kind of how I got on with it. Some of it is good, much of it is bad. So, yeah.
But is it your fault? Or?
Well, it's a mix of both. Yeah, I'd say predominantly my fault. So this is from an Android development perspective, because that's what I do primarily. Bit of a disclaimer on all of this is that I am not a JavaScript guy. Yeah, well, this is it. You're in for a shock.
Isn't Java and JavaScript the same thing?
See, that's what I thought. That's why I thought this would be really easy. As it turned out, they are different.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, radically different.
Wow.
I'm also not a dynamic type enthusiast. It'd be great if I liked dynamic type languages, because then JavaScript would also be easy, but I like strongly typed languages. Yeah. I'm not a React Native evangelist either. I'm not a big fan of it. And I'm very bad at building presentations. So overall, you're in for a treat. However...
You are lucky no one turned up.
Wow. Highly experienced Android developer and slightly arrogant. Massively deflated by Lee right now, but I'm enthusiastic about modular clean code. That's how I like to design my apps. And I'm open to being told I'm wrong. So if you see something's wrong in this, shout it out and we'll deal with it, because I don't know everything about React like at all. So a quick poll. Show me your hands if you have heard of React Native. Way too slow. If you have written some JavaScript in the past. Okay, good. And if you've written any React Native apps. Oh damn, I was hoping for mildly more than that. So Jamie, everyone look, Jamie knows React Native. This is very important to know. So, this is good. Oh, and have any of you worked at Facebook on the React Native framework team? Good. This means I won't get stabbed on the way out. So, what is React Native? Learn once, write anywhere, build mobile apps with React. That's their slogan, basically. So what they're not trying to solve is the problem that Java solved way back when, where it was write once, run anywhere. That's not what this is trying to do. This is trying to make it a language that you can use in multiple different situations. So you use one language to write your iOS app, the same language to write your Android app, and then whatever comes in the future. So what does that fall down as? It's written in JavaScript, ES6, and uses something called Babel to do some backwards compatibility so it can use the older JavaScript style. It uses JSX, which is an XML-like language, and it uses that for the views. And it uses Flexbox for CSS-like styling of those JSX elements. I'll show you what that looks like in terms of development environment and coding in a bit. It does not use a web view to render. Very fundamental, important thing that we've discussed many times about how this could work. So yeah, I'm going to prove this to you in a minute so you can see exactly how this works. It has Rails type scaffolding. I've not seen anybody use that word before, but if you ever use Ruby on Rails or anything where you've got like the kind of Rails commands and it will kind of spin you off a project, React Native is the same thing. So from the command line you run React Native, then a command. So for example, the init will build you all the things you need to get running for an Android project and an iOS project. And it will also build you some little separate iOS files and Android files to put your specific project into. And then to run this project, you do run Android. So what that's going to do, well, if you're doing iOS, you obviously run a different one. But for the Android one, I use run Android. So it starts a JavaScript server that hosts the JavaScript that your app is then going to read and render. Then it runs the regular Gradle commands to install the app and run it. So, something quite important is it's not cross-compiling either. The device executes the JavaScript that you're writing on the device. So it uses the JavaScript core, which is the same one that's used in the Safari browser, in order to execute that Java to build kind of a model of what it should look like, and then it uses that to make the components that it's going to show you out of the things that are included in the Android SDK. So this will make a bit more sense in a second. but also why? Why would we do this? That was the same question I had, and this is the kind of thing I came up with, was just, why would you do this? And you really should have thought about it beforehand. But they did it anyway, so why serious reasons? You can share the business logic between your platforms. There's some high number that Facebook, when they built their advertising application, they had massive reuse between the two of them. I couldn't find the number to hand, but it was like high 80s basically, which is a nice kind of thing to have. Faster development cycle. So this is one of the big selling points, that you don't recompile the app when you are testing it. There's a feature which you can have enabled as well, which does live reloads. So as soon as you save your code, that's it. The emulator, whatever you're running, pulls down the JavaScript and renders it again. So that's saving you the 2-minute cycle of Gradle going round. And yeah, if you've done any Android development, it becomes very frustrating to play with Gradle a lot. Web devs can make mobile-ish apps. I'll explain why ish in a minute. And it's not a slight, it's just, it could be better. So, if it's not a web view, then what is it? For this, I'm going to jump into the computer and show you a little demo. So, this is my fantastic application that I've written. I know what you're thinking, that is amazing, Alec. It's really bad. But have any of you used the UI Automator tool from Google? Okay, so what this allows a lot of testers to do is to look at an app that's running and find out how to identify each of the fields. So if you've ever done any testing with Selenium for web apps or things of that nature where you're finding a particular thing by an ID, this is the kind of tool you can use to kind of inspect elements like this Iron Cross Army, and then you can see its attributes. So here I can see that this particular one is a text view. So this is an app that I've got, I'm running it, and it is a text view. It's a text view inside of a view group, inside of a frame layout. Now, that's all perfectly fine. That's not a bad thing, that's not a bad way to do it. But we can go a little bit further with that, which is, I've used Stetho, which is a tool from Facebook, and what we can do, well, that's not what I wanted. I didn't think I could do that. What else? That was very surprising. No. That's, okay, 1 second. There we go. So, wow, that did not work out how I expected it. It's all gone wrong, Tim. Right, we'll try that again in a second, but basically, these text views, this is what, from an outside perspective, like looking at it from a black box perspective, you can see that it's a text view. Under the covers, it's actually a React native text view, which is how they go about rendering under the covers. So what I wanted to do was show you sort of what that looks like in a coding perspective. So this is the application that I've built. This is just fetching something from the internet in order to show it, and this is where it's rendering. So this is the so yeah, we've got the JavaScript, then we're processing it to do the, what is it called? It's not Flexbox. So there's 3 things that React components are made of.
JSX.
JSX, thank you. So this is the JSX that's used in order to kind of build your application hierarchy. So here we've got the view, and then this text here is turning into that text view that we saw in the UI Automator. This here is kind of your CSS style, Flexbox styling of those elements. And so, if we try and run this, should run up in the emulator. So what's happening here at the bottom is that it's running that React Native run Android command. So it spins up the JavaScript, hosts it within the IDE I'm using, and then that enables the emulator to see it, read it, and produce this user interface. And we're installing. So, there we go. Now, hopefully, what I should be able to do. Yeah, so this is what I wanted to show you guys, which is, this is the hierarchy, which looks really deep and nested. And that's one of the gripes I have with Facebook's framework, is that it is very nested. One of the things that was very prevalent a couple of years ago was that you want your hierarchies to be very shallow. And that's why things like relative layout came out and constraint layout for Android, is that you didn't want to have lots of nesting of linear layouts. And this kind of does the opposite, where it wraps everything into smaller layouts. So for example, here we've got this React text view. So that's what I was talking about when I say it is a text view, which is a standard Android component, but they've got their own flavor of it that's being used. Something that I wanted to go on even further is to show a more complex application than what I've built, that has more like an application that you'd actually expect to see. This is also one that's in the wild, and it's on the Facebook page for an application that is built with React Native and is for iOS and for Android. So it's the USwitch app. They have this lovely thing. They've got a view pager, so you can swipe across things, and that's quite pretty. And so I thought, okay, how is that built? So using this UI automator again, I can pull the views from that emulator and then start to interrogate the hierarchy to see exactly the components that it's made from. So if we look at this, as I highlight things, it starts to show them in the hierarchy. So here we've got an image view. Let me try and zoom in a little bit.
I don't suppose you compared that to the iOS equivalent in terms of that nesting, deep nesting.
Completely ignored iOS entirely.
I'm sure.
Mostly because
I just wonder, you know, is that because of Android, or is that because of React?
I think it's because of React, just because of the way. So the theory that they have, which is actually quite good, is that everything is a component, and you break your app into smaller components.
Mm-hmm.
A caveat of that is that every that you can't, the root of that component can only have one child, and it has to be a view basically. So because of that, you've got to have a container for each of your components. So if you've got multiple components, you've got a larger hierarchy. So in this one, for example, we've got this image view, but then interestingly, you do have a view pager. So this is where it becomes quite interesting, because within their app, in JavaScript, they're saying, I want to use a view pager, and then it's rendering out a support library view pager, which is fantastic. That is amazing, because this is not using a custom view. They haven't rewritten the view pager. They're using what's already in the operating system, and it provides a really slick native experience. So that is really good. But then there's an issue, which I found very frustrating when I was trying to find out how would you do a button in React, which I thought, okay, this must be simple. I must be missing something, which is one of the reasons I started to interrogate this app to see how have they done it. In Android, you have a button component, and it does button-like things. You can set a state on it, you can click on it, and when you click away from it, it changes color. You can have a disabled state. All these things you usually get for free. It's also written kind of into the platform, so it's the same on kind of all devices. Now this is the button that they've got on here, which is just a text view with a background color.
That's a bit weird.
Yeah, and that's what frustrates me, is that you don't have a button component.
Is that because of the API? Because again, on iOS, it's like, it's quite often that you'll subclass a UI button, and then you'll piss around with it to customize your buttons quite a lot. Is it because of the API for the button itself perhaps is restrictive?
There is no API for the button yet. So currently you have, the way you add clicks to things is you have a highlightable click region, I think it's called, or something along those lines. And then inside of that element, you then put the thing that you want to be able to be clicked on, and that's how it's working. And it's just a shame, because then you've got to style all of your buttons yourself. So yeah, and just a quick, so if you look at this, you've got this view group and a text view. Now, what I would have preferred to have seen, I have an example of another app that has a button, and to prove that I'm not crazy, Oh, wow. To supplement that, I'm not crazy. So this is just a Google app, and in the bottom here you've got a button, and this is what I would expect to see. So as you can see, it's just a button and a spinner.
But was that therefore not the USwitch developer decision to create a component that was
There's just
made up like that?
Well, that's a good question. There is no, so in the React native documentation, there is no button component. There is only text. There is no
That is
button.
literally not an option.
So I thought, okay, libraries. Let's find some libraries that do buttons. This will be easy. And then I had a heart attack because there are a lot of libraries, which usually you would think would be a good thing. But it's not, because I don't know which of these you would end up using, because you've got native button, APSL React Native, material button, simple button, he liked button, curious name, never mind, and further down, awesome button, which you would imagine must be the best thing in the world. But yeah, but no one eats at best kebab, so you can't really trust that awesome button is going to be good.
I'm guessing eventually one of them will take the lead as being the popular one.
Yes. So that's one of the
That's
caveats.
what stars and downloads are for.
Yeah, but yes. But which one do you choose? And how do you know that a newer one isn't better than an older one that's just been around for a long time?
But the whole component thing, the component marketplace, and like that all needs like so much work, discovery, everything about it. It's like complete like.
Because
It's just a free for all.
Yeah, I mean, this is React.parts, which isn't necessarily like the canonical source of all this stuff. It's
No,
just,
and there's loads of them.
yeah, this is just one example that I found where I was just like, I'd love a button. And even when I used it, all it was doing was creating a text view with styling around it. And so I think this is because there are a lot of JavaScript developers building these components and not a lot of Android developers building them instead. Which is where...
So could you build a Android button component?
Why haven't you built an Android button
I was
component?
busy building this. That's exactly the reason. But you raise a very good point.
Or could you? Does the framework allow you to do that?
You can, yeah. One of the things I was going to say was, I just think about it, maybe, so you're talking about one of the elements that allows you to click on it as a link. So I think it's called touchable highlight, it's basically the link.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that their reasoning, it might be a case of in Android, button is ultimately just a text view, just with some styling.
Yeah.
Button will extend from text. So I'm wondering whether they are deliberately in their implementation, they're deliberately not using it because there's already something to do with handling clicks that they've already produced themselves, which is that touchable highlight thing. But like Lee was saying, you can definitely create components that have anything native side natively. So basically, on one of the projects that we're working on for CharityKit, there's basically on Android there's basically no implementation of sharing across platform in React Native. So it's literally you'd expect, oh, I just call like share or something, and it will just go off and share, as in bring it like a share sheet on iOS, or same kind of thing on Android. It just doesn't exist. So basically, for CharityKit, I wrote a wrap around it. So you can literally wrap around any native component that you like, and that's basically all most of the libraries are doing. They're just wrapping around native things, and then maybe for one platform, and then you get somebody else that will do it cross-platform. They've done a lot of support for iOS, so they spent a lot of time supporting iOS. So there's loads of iOS elements in there, but Android is kind of like a second thought. So I think right now
It came out a lot later, didn't it?
Yeah. They're starting to do that, so maybe they'll start adding in like button, which is a pretty cool element, and I still can't understand why you don't have that.
Yeah, it's one of the things I was frustrated with when I was just trying to start out and get something kind of cobbled together.
Does that mean you then lose like all of the nice kind of shadowy type stuff that you get with material design because they're not using the right?
Yeah, unless someone has styled it to do that.
Hovery type things and the animations out for like the phone book and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Which is like the best part about building UIs on Android is that you just throw in a button and it all sort of works. But the main thing I wanted to take away from that is the fact that it's not a web view, and it is definitely rendered as native components.
I lost that.
Sorry.
I lost that point.
Lost sight of that a little bit.
In the buttons thing.
Yeah, no, I kind of went a little bit overboard. But yeah, so something I wanted to point out, just in case you do want to go into this, piece of missing documentation that I've dug out is, if you want to, so one of the best things about React Native is the idea that it can live reload, but it's not enabled by default, and you have to enable it. So usually you shake the phone, brings up the dev menu, hard to do with a laptop. Do not shake your MacBook, nothing's going to happen. But the way to do it is you have to press the menu key, and there's no way to do that without using ADB. So you have to send this kind of cryptic shell command to fake putting into a number. So what that looks like is, if we go into the application again, so we can bring up the dev menu. As you can see, I've done this a few times. It looks like this. So this is the one you're after, is this live reload. So it currently says disable, and then if we run it again, we can now enable it. So you might be thinking, what does that actually do? And just to demonstrate kind of the whole reason that people love React is that we have this hierarchy in here where we've got styles. There's nothing at the top of it. It's like a really bad magic trick. And then we put hello, Mobile Dorset. Who doesn't love live coding? And then save, and as if by magic, it'll make me look like an asshole. This is terrible. Yeah. Yeah. What should have happened? Well, as you can see, I didn't have to recompile the app. I kind of cheated there and pressed the double R key to make it reload and fetch the bundle automatically. I'm not sure why it didn't go and get it. I might have tweaked something badly.
Could have just not told us.
Oh, there we go. So save, and now it's hello, Mobile Do. Nice bit of rebranding on the fly. Who doesn't want that? So
it's doing what the web's been doing for the last 20 years.
yeah. So welcome to the future. It's the past. Yeah, basically. So yeah, enjoy live reloading. Barriers to entry. So this is what I wanted to cover. So I put for noobs and non-web devs because I fit into one of those categories. So to me, there was a lot of things to learn. There's Android and iOS specific features that you will need to learn. So for example, if you want to do deep linking into your app, you will have to go into the Android code and the iOS code to change it. You can't do that from JavaScript. It's got the hook points in so that once you've enabled it in the native code, you can then use it, but you still have to get kind of deep into it and to assign it. The reason on Android for that is that you've got to put in the intent filters to enable your activity to capture it. Just on the subject of activities briefly, I'm just going to jump into how many of you have seen an Android app's code before?
Mm-hmm.
Great, okay, so this will make a little bit of sense. It's got one activity, and that's it. And it's called React Activity. And so all of the views are hosted within it. And when you're navigating around screens, it's got its own navigator and it's just popping views off and messing around, all within one activity. So that's kind of how the magic works, which is interesting and scary at the same time. Yeah, it's clever, but dangerous. So yeah, one activity to rule them all.
Does that break any of the natural kind of implementation of things on the phone, like pressing certain like home buttons and things like that?
Well, so I don't know how they've implemented the navigator because when I looked at it, my head exploded. But if you're using fragments, which some people choose to, some people don't, you have a backstack. So you start putting things onto it, and then when you press the back button, they start popping off.
Yeah.
With this, you're not going to have that at all. It's got to be implemented by this navigator thing. And I think the navigator does have some parts into it that do it, but you have to like code it in. So it gets a little bit hairy, in my opinion. So yeah, my preference is definitely, and also I miss the intent system. I love intents. I think they're really great. The fact that you can start like someone else's app or someone else can start your app, I think is amazing. Like it's the main reason I chose to do Android development, I think, is because it had that functionality. Much the same that iOS now has the deep linking. So there's many things to learn. The programming model, the Flux Redux type thing, I haven't touched that because I didn't want to. I was already learning JavaScript and a whole bunch of other many things. And I was just like, this is too much. All I want is just get an example out that works. But it's kind of the idea that you have a single state object and then everything else reads from that and cascades down. And that does make sense, but it's another thing that you need to learn before you start doing this. Libraries, as I mentioned a minute ago, there are so many libraries. And not all of them are done well. You're right about being able to see the stars, but even that is a tricky game of which one do you even begin to trust. And it's just a platform immaturity thing. I mean, they're only on version like 0.29, so I can't give them too much stick about being terrible. I guess they haven't even released version 1, so that'd be mean.
I think the fact that you can so easily create and distribute components is a really great thing, but they need to figure out the marketplace.
Yeah, but there's no authority in it yet, so it's just anyone can do it, which is, you don't know how long it's going to be supported for, if it does the right job, any caveats with that particular library. So something else?
Often with those things, if one kind of stands out as the leader and becomes so popular everyone uses it, it kind of just gets absorbed back into the core and they go, cool, you've written this and everyone loves it, we'll use it.
Yeah, it gets adopted by like the core framework, right? That is really good, and hopefully that will happen with a lot of these things that people start to write. Maybe not Jamie's stuff, but they want to keep the quality high, right?
You shouldn't be so negative to other people.
Oh, really? So something I found quite difficult when I was starting to look for things was hard to find.
That's another.
Well, I was trying to. Oh, yeah, exactly. I honestly don't know what that does yet.
That's another.
But this is it. So I was looking for something quick to get me going. So I was looking for, some sort of de facto, this is your boilerplate, you can just get started. And I found 3 within minutes, and then I started looking at them, and it just blew my mind.
Have you seen the not another React boilerplate meme?
Oh, really? Is that a thing?
It's-
Okay, because that was my exact
it's the
experience.
thing to do, yeah. Or
Because,
not to do now.
yeah, I mean, in here you've got Webpack, I don't know what that is, Greenkeeper, that's curious.
Webpack's great, but it's it's a head fuck completely.
Yeah, I don't need that. I'm trying to learn JavaScript already. I don't need more things to
Yeah.
break my brain.
People always pick the weirdest names for these things as well.
I know.
There's so many different weird terms I have to use as part of my job, just because of what people decided to call their thing.
Well, Redux Thunk, React Native Router Flux, FBJS. It's just,
That is
Isn't this how we
that's JavaScript as
make
well.
ourselves look technical in front of all the business people by just using magical words?
Or jargon. Yeah, jargon that'll give you a job for life.
Sometimes they just use like really common words as well, and then that makes it even more frustrating.
Well, especially if you want to search for it on the internet. I've got a problem with fly. Oh, great, okay. I wonder if anyone's searched for fly problems before, and then you're screwed entirely. So yeah, that is a serious problem. And then this one is great because it runs on both iOS and Android on a single code base. I agree, that's magic, but then there's so much in there. It can work with Parse backend, what was the other one? Parse.com or the Happy server or OpenShift. And these are things, as an Android developer, I'm not entirely sure what most of these are.
I wouldn't really use any of these starter packs myself because in 2 months they'll all be outdated.
Well, this is it. I
I'm
wanted.
just using Init, React Native Init, which is going to be the base one.
Yes, but it's a moving target because, every time they upgrade a version, that init is going to change. And I thought this would be a good way to see what libraries are prevalent or best practices. What I found is there's just a lot, and no one has decided best practice yet. And that kind of got me a little bit lost. Then I struck this kind of problem. Does anybody know ES6s? Good, then you can probably help explain it to me. It is really good because you can have classes. So you can get these quite magic things.
It's the new agreed JavaScript standard.
Which is really good. I like this. I like standardization. I also like classes. So this kind of import syntax over require is great, and exporting modules and stuff is all good. So this is what's generated by your init command, and this is what's in all the documentation.
Documentation is
This leaves me with a big problem when I try and just copy over functionality from the documentation into my ES6 app and then go, I don't know JavaScript, and none of these methods even compile. There is something horribly wrong here. So that left me with quite a headache. And every example is the same. And I understand immature platform, but it's one thing that really tripped me up.
Yeah, documentation.
What else have we got? Development environments. I miss IntelliJ. I do. I love it. I miss it. We're best buds. So this is what I started with. A text editor and a terminal, as all good developers should begin with. So this is for running my Android thing. That spawns this little window over here. That's just a terminal to host the JavaScript so that the emulator can read this. And then Sublime for editing text. So this is already a pretty full window. And I don't even have any documentation up yet. So if you're going to do React Native, make sure you have 2 monitors.
There's a new, there's an app called Deco.
I've seen that, yeah.
Have you seen it? It's specifically for React Native. It's a React Native IDE, which is basically, I think, just drag and drop a bunch, like a block of text, like a component, and just drop it in. I think that's what it is at the moment, but if it's designed specifically for this workflow, it could be quite interesting.
So a way to develop straight onto the phone instead of using the Android emulator, so you use that as an extra screen.
Oh, I don't know, that sounds terrifying.
I mean, not directly onto your actual phone, but emulate it via your phone, so you can preview it on the phone, and then there's your extra screen for your emulator.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, you can do it straight onto a phone. I use an emulator because, yeah, emulators. Yeah, no, you could definitely use a phone. So that would kind of get this out of your way. But then I still need the documentation to see how any of the methods, well, what any of the method signatures look like, because dynamic language, there's no autocomplete or anything along those lines. Nuclei.
Workspaces.
Sorry?
Have you heard of workspaces?
That's nice, but so this is just flicking between different workspaces. Yeah, that's great if I want to develop RSI through doing this, or get one of those. What's the technology where you could swipe at the screen? Leap. Yeah, get one of those bad boys. Go to the Minority Report land. Yeah, no, I don't really want to do that.
You know, you're using an incorrect size keyboard every single day, which is going to encourage your RSA like 20% more than swiping.
No, I've got a real keyboard at home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is my out and about town
This is your
keyboard.
presentation.
Yeah, specially made. So Nuclei. This is one from Facebook. It's not bad. It spawns the terminal window inside the IDE. That was the only advantage I found from it. So I actually used Visual Studio Code, which you kind of saw earlier. I love it. It's great. It does like debugging so you can step through it. Fantastic. Common issues with all of these. It's a dynamic language, so I can't have any autocomplete, which I use a lot of because it tells me the things that I can do with the objects that I've got around me. It makes programming, you understand an API immediately because you can see exactly what it can do. I don't get the method signatures wrong because it's all strongly typed. And I also, in IntelliJ, I have the documentation in line with my code, so I can see it right there. And I miss that. I'm not sure what this does. This part here, flow, I'm not entirely sure what it does. It's only on some of the examples. Yeah, I just didn't understand this. Because it seems, as well, it's something to do with dependency injection of some type, but it's inside of a comment, which is crazy. That's not how you do annotations. But I think it's how you have to for this. So yeah, that blew my mind a little bit. So conclusion. This is how I feel about JavaScript, unfortunately, just because I am not smart. So that was good. Will I use React Native future projects? The answer is 100% no. I will not be using it. Ever.
But would you be the dedicated Android developer on a React Native project where there are JavaScript
I'm not sure I can
experts?
I couldn't handle the suicide rate. It'd just be
Because I think that's where you could be dangerous.
in a good way.
Yeah, in a good way,
right.
because obviously there's a lot of things missing, it's early, and I don't know, maybe you guys would probably agree that proper project will need not just a JavaScript developer, but someone who knows their way around the native libraries and can create custom
Fill in the gaps,
modules
basically.
and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't see why not.
That's right. So knowledge of it, of how it works, is important versus dedication.
I think that's exactly
to
what I
it.
aimed for when I set out to learn this stuff, and this is why I don't have a good example to show you guys, unfortunately, because I wanted to understand how it works and how it's written and kind of the impacts and the limitations rather than being able to smash out a really good React Native app, just because the learning curve for it, there was no reason for me to learn all of it if it wasn't going to be for me. And unfortunately, I've decided that I'd rather write Swift and Android, ideally.
That'd be cool.
So just a couple of resources if you want to learn some more on this, because I did find some really good stuff that went along. This top one is really good. Just a quick walkthrough on the different things that you'll encounter when developing React Native apps. And it takes like 5-10 minutes to get through. If you read nothing else, that's really worth looking at. The Facebook documentation is actually quite good to understand how it works. It's bad to try and learn JavaScript, but it's good if you want to know how they brought all this stuff together. And this guy is amazing. Java is superior to React Native in practically every way. I couldn't have written a better post myself, so I've linked to it. I mean, he's very opinionated because he has an alternative solution, but yeah, I like his opinion. So, thank you, and any questions, please see Jamie. So, yeah. Also, feel free to ask each other. I mean, I can answer some questions, but not many. Oh, that's good.
Do and maybe a Jamie question based on your opinion of JavaScript. Do you think the React HTML and script and stuff inside of the JS files kind of is an issue on separation of concern things, or?
No, it's fine. I think it's quite a nice way of doing it in terms of like components and separating them all out. And like for developers on either platform, so say you've got an Android developer, iOS developer, or JavaScript developer, pretty much all three of them are going to understand what it means.
Yeah.
Out of the box, you don't have to know any other language. Like most people who are programming know of how HTML works, or ultimately JSX, which is pretty simple.
So I mean, like it all being in one file. So that kind of if you're working on one component, does Alec do you have to build the whole button component, or can you do a bit and then you do a bit, and do you start getting into issues of?
It's not necessarily all in one file,
Yeah.
in so much as the component can break down into its own.
So you can break
parts.
it as deep as you want.
Yeah, you can separate the styles, and you know, you can include inline styles, but you can also have a separate style sheet and a style sheet folder in that component.
But I guess like the kind of the HTML and the JS always has to be together though, or even that can be separate.
Yeah, you can have it separate.
Yeah.
So it's convenient to have it together.
Yeah.
But yeah, I saw some examples where, because it's just the render function, basically, you can have a component, and then I think you can feed data into that component.
Yeah.
But it's
Using props and stuff.
yeah. So the props is immutable state, and then you have a state that's inside of a component, and that's the bit that gets changed, and that's passed down. So props are passed down from the parent, and that's how you get your inherited properties into it. One of the biggest advantages that I read about that kind of approach is that you've got encapsulation of these different components, and so when you pass them off to different developers, they don't need to know different parts about it. That's something you were saying as well.
Yeah, in our case for Charity Kit, basically we've essentially created an app or a platform that allows you to, well, the server will dynamically service all of the JSX that we're going to actually render on screen, and we basically do it all dynamically, so you can basically edit the content server side, and it will update in the app as well. And because of the live updates, we've done it so that the server can send a bundle across, so you can do live updates without touching the App Store at all, and it just automatically update on device, which is really nice. Yeah.
Why wouldn't you use it?
Sorry?
Why wouldn't you use it? Is there any projects you don't use it for? Like,
React.
yeah.
Well, the learning curve is that, you know, and there's still, we've been using it for 6 months, really, so, and it's fairly chunky learning curve because we didn't get any JavaScript developers into it. It's guys that were writing coding native who've learned it and still wouldn't use it.
Do you see in a curve where you probably had to still? Fortunately, you had the guys who already knew the native platforms, and presumably you were writing apps where you didn't find existing, the library components that are available for the apps that you were building, where you had to create those components and then bring them into the library. Have you seen a curve where maybe you did that a lot and then that's gradually tailoring off? Because you guys do like a you don't do a lot of different apps. You have like
no, that's it. I mean, we use React for one product that we produce at the moment.
Yeah.
And as I said, it was a steep learning curve. But the guys that are doing it are saying they're writing a lot less code actually to do similar kind of stuff, and it's much once you've got the components, they are very reusable. You get quicker at doing it, and it's so fast to be able to just create new prototypes and stuff like that. Cause kind of delivery platforms.
So one of the reasons for not doing it might be when you have that design of that app, understanding what's available in the library, what's available perhaps in this very chaotic marketplace of stuff you could possibly reuse, and then how much you actually need to build yourself.
Yeah, it would be a question of, right, I've got to build loads of this natively anyway, why would you, you kind of, I think there's a point where there's a percentage of the code that you're producing natively anyway. There's like a tipping point where it's not, you may as well do that.
So was cherry-picking, because obviously you guys must have so much repositories of like native code because of the stuff you've done before.
Yeah.
Was Charity Kit a experiment that the guys wanted to learn React Native, and then that's how it kind of, because obviously you would have had that steep learning curve at the beginning.
A little bit. It was what we were trying to achieve. We were trying to find basically what really kicked it all off was, so we've got a content management system that renders natively, great for rendering content, but we could never render business logic and stuff like that. It got too complicated to do any kind of logic in it. So we were looking around for different ways of looking at that, and we were at one point we were kind of building or architecting out almost a framework that was React. And we had one guy that was like a bit of a React evangelist, and he was going, "You're just describing this thing that already exists. Use the thing that already exists."
And we're all really supportive.
We've added probably we've created like 4 or 5, something like that, libraries of things that weren't already available in React, and they're all on our GitHub for them to use, and we use it in that project. But I can see those kind of. I think the reasons why we've actually built those libraries is partly because React Native isn't that mature yet. So there's lots of these gaps which we're basically filling in.
That's what it needs, right? A lot of people to do that.
Yeah.
Especially on the Android side, there's like support which they're addressing now.
Another reason not to do it is just and it's the same with any JavaScript framework, isn't it? All the dependencies there are outside of your hands. So NPM or whatever it was that went bang in March time, suddenly nobody could compile. Absolute disaster until they sort out their life. So you are dependent on a whole world of other a load of stuff that's happening. God knows where GitHub is toasted and all the rest of it.
I'd imagine in something like 6 months or a year, you should be able to just go into a React Native project and have all of these standard components just ready to go, like a lot of common ones. So at this point in time, we're really early on. It's like 0.29. It's super early, and like we're doing projects like really early into the life cycle of it. So that's why we're building these libraries so that we can actually get certain things done that we need to do. But ultimately, I reckon 6 to 12 months, something like that. It's going to be something.
And there'll be another one, and we've got to throw it in the bin and stuff.
That's sure. We started a project that's related to this, which is basically like a sketch plugin. Probably will work better actually on like Adobe XD maybe, but it's like a React config generator. So you design your UIs and your flows in Sketch as a designer.
Okay.
Press a button, export the config. So there's like a whole syntax of the whole groups and layers thing. Because of the component nature of it, you use the grouping and the layer hierarchy. And you press a button, outputs a config, server processes it, builds it. and deploys it. It's quite
Yeah, that's
interesting.
neat.
Does it use the native Android button?
That's all I want. I just want a button.
What native
Yes.
Android button?
Just want my button.
I
I want to see my button in my XML. That's all I
Stick it
want.
out.
The most awesome
Button.
Maybe that's it.
wrappers
Awesome,
around the
awesome
button.
Most awesome.
Because
Awesome
that's all
button.
sound
Yeah.
because awesome button already exists.
Awesome.
Ah,
Awesome.
awesome.
Double.
Just
double
excellent
awesome.
button will do. That's fine. I don't need
You've got to
awesome.
go A excellent, so alphabetical.
Aardvark button.
Yeah.
Be
Brilliant.
British about it. The not so bad button.
Yeah. Well, this is degraded very
The
quickly.
positively mediocre button.
Just a button.
So, I think
So
we'll
I've got
take.
another question,
Oh.
if you don't mind. So you mentioned that you can wrap certain things in a plugin. So if there's a piece of functionality in Android or iOS that you want that's not in there, does it expose the whole of the Android SDK and the iOS SDK into JavaScript?
I might have
This
an
might
answer
be
for
a
you.
Jamie question.
Wow.
The reason I ask is I've been playing with another thing called NativeScript, which is extremely similar to this. It's basically the same thing, except it works with Angular 2 and TypeScript, but it does all the same things. And I thought that was quite an interesting one to look at because it actually they basically reverse engineered the whole of the Android SDK and made that available to JavaScript.
Yep.
So if something doesn't work, you create an Android button natively, wrap it up in a TypeScript file, and do that for both platforms, and then it works. So I'm interested if this does a similar thing, or if it's closer to something like Ionic, where you have to bridge into it.
It's similar, yeah. So you basically create components,
Right.
and ultimately, if you draw down enough in the actual code base, it eventually goes down to something that's native.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what I did with the sharing thing. Is on the Android side, there was literally no libraries or nothing built into the framework that allows you to do it. So I basically wrote native code, then like a JavaScript layer on top, so you can interface with it, which is very similar to what you described. That's basically how it works.
They're
So,
extremely similar, actually.
this is one that comes with it, which is for doing toasts. So you can see here in the show, it's just running on the UI thread. This is your native code right here.
Right.
So that's the thing for popping up a toast. So I imagine you do the same thing for
Okay. Yeah.
everything.
Pretty much the same as Xamarin, just different syntax, like the same kind of
Yeah.
injection syntax.
Well, if anything, this has made me want to learn Xamarin. So
You should probably check out, if you don't like the dynamic, you should probably check out NativeScript and TypeScript as well, because that kind of makes it less dynamic.
are they strong? Are they strongly typed?
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
I'm in.
It adds strong typing to JavaScript.
Ooh.
It's quite fun because it lets you opt in and opt out whenever you want. So it's not like you're kind of saying, right, everything is now strongly typed.
So this is CoffeeScript, you say? Or?
No, this is
It's
TypeScript.
TypeScript, okay. TypeScript. Okay,
And it works great with VS Code as well. It's just joyful.
good. I like VS Code. We're friends. Me and VS Code. Right, so I think we'll take a quick 5-minute break.